Hi, welcome back to another episode of Nobody's Doing It Right, the podcast for those who are uncertain. My name is Kat, I'm your host, and for today's episode, we're going to talk about how your selfishness might just be a form of people-pleasing. Now, of course, I'm not a therapist, I'm not an expert on this. This is just what I've learned from my own experience, from what I've seen in myself and the way my people-pleasing manifests sometimes, and what I've seen in other people and the discussions I've had with them about this. And I think many times we might see some of our behaviors, some of our avoidance, our closing off to people, our saying no, not doing things that we don't want to do. We might see that as selfishness, quote unquote. And we might assume that, okay, we can't be people pleasers if we are acting so selfishly all the time. But I've realized that a lot of those qualities that we think are selfish qualities, or maybe we've been told are selfish qualities, I've realized that they're actually protective qualities. They're protecting us because we know deep down we are people pleasers. And we know that if we don't set up those hard boundaries, those very selfish boundaries, we will overgive. And every time we overgive, it's exhausting, it's painful, it hurts us deep down because we don't actually have healthy boundaries. We don't even know maybe how to express ourselves properly in order to even set boundaries like that. And this is something I've had to learn. I've learned this throughout my life because when I started therapy years ago, I started with the inability to express myself, to express my needs. Like that was the intention behind me starting therapy. And I realized over time that it wasn't that I was super introverted. It wasn't that I was closed off to people, that I didn't like people, that I didn't like opening up. It was that I didn't have the words or the ability to express myself when necessary in order to set boundaries so that I didn't overgive, because I knew that I was a people pleaser. I knew that I was going to overextend myself for other people all the time. So it was so much easier to just avoid people, to avoid being around people, to avoid giving at all, because I knew I would overgive. But that might seem from the outside, if you haven't realized that this is what might be happening, that you are people pleasing or that you are a people pleaser deep down, you might see that as, I'm just selfish. I'm just really closed off. I'm just very cold. So I can't be a people pleaser because I'm doing all these things that others would consider not nice or like not pleasing to other people. But I think it is actually very beneficial to consider that maybe the fact that you have such rigid boundaries is coming from a place of fear, that you know that if you loosen up a little bit on these boundaries, that if you let yourself engage in connections with people, that you will empty your cup for them because you don't have the ability to express yourself, you don't have the language to express yourself, and you don't have the self-control to know that I've given too much. I need to pull back a little bit because I'm empty right now. I need somebody to now help me fill up my cup. All of those things are actually people pleasing. They're actually a manifestation of being a people pleaser. So instead, it's so much easier, or not even just easier as if you aren't wanting to put the work in. I just think if you haven't had the opportunity to learn about these things and explore them through therapy or whatever, it makes logical sense. Your subconscious will find the safest, easiest way to protect you, which is to close off, to be selfish, to make yourself, not easily accessible to people. Because if you are, you know what'll happen. You'll give too much. You'll be drained. You'll be overwhelmed. You'll feel awful after. So your subconscious is like, okay, then we can't do anything that involves being open to people because we know what's going to happen. So then it looks like selfishness. It looks like you are a selfish person and that you don't even have to worry about being a people pleaser. But I think once you look at it from the perspective of maybe I am a people pleaser and this is why I'm so closed off, it actually changes the way you see yourself and it changes the way you then start showing up with people. Because I think the fear right there is to acknowledge that you're a people pleaser. I think that's the fear of it, right? To recognize that you actually have a weakness for people and for the way you show up. And probably also, again, this is just me speculating because from my own experience, right, what I noticed in myself, but if you recognize in yourself that you fear judgment, that you put on a mask every time you're around people, that you aren't authentically you, that is to me a telltale sign that you are a people pleaser, that you are so scared of being rejected and abandoned and judged that you are putting on whatever you need to put on to be approved by people in the small amount of time that you allow yourself to be around them. And in that small amount of time that you allow yourself to be around people or to engage with people, you're doing all of that. Of course, it's exhausting. Of course, it's draining. So you're not going to want to keep doing that. You're not going to want to do that all the time if you feel so drained, if you feel so not like yourself to be around people. So you're going to pull back, you're going to close off, and you're going to think, And I just don't like people. I'm not a people person. I don't like being around people. I'd rather be by myself. I'm the only person that can understand me. All those things that come up. It could be that you're a people pleaser. And it's important that you recognize that. And it's important that you realize that you need to actually start cultivating the ability to be around people and also be yourself while around them, and to know how to separate the two. Because if you're always worried about rejection and abandonment all the time, you're going to act inauthentically. You're going to overgive in whatever the way that looks like for you. And you're going to get exhausted, and you're going to pull away, and you're going to go back into your little cave, and then you're going to feel like a selfish person. And people might perceive you as selfish. Now, obviously, it's not about what other people think about you, but it's for your own reflection to think about. If someone has told you that, maybe consider it. Like, okay, am I selfish, or am I just setting boundaries that this person doesn't like? That's a different story, right? That doesn't mean you're selfish. That's just, Or am I being perceived as selfish because I'm so closed off, because I choose to never engage with other people, to never consider other people because of the fear that I will overgive? That's something to really look into, because ultimately it will close you off to connections from people, right? Ultimately it's about you and the way you get to experience life and the people in it. We need to have that healthy amount of interdependence in order to feel okay. We need that as humans. We're communal creatures, right? It's not about closing yourself off completely, and it's not about overgiving and always needing to be around people all the time and having that codependence, right? It's about finding that nice middle ground, but you cannot have that nice middle ground. You can't feel safe enough to explore connections with people and engage with people if you don't believe that you have the boundaries there to do it, and the ability to express yourself. And if you believe that you're going to be a people pleaser, of course you're not going to want to do it. It's going to be too scary. So consider that. If you see yourself more as someone who's selfish, if you listen to my content about people pleasing and it doesn't really resonate with you, but you still notice yourself being very overwhelmed by the judgment of others, or worried that you're going to be judged, or you put a mask on all the time, that might be a sign that you are actually a people pleaser. And I think if you actually think about that and internalize that perspective and consider it as maybe that's exactly what you're going through, it'll shift the way you see things. And that is, I think, one step closer to your personal growth and to getting the life that you ultimately want to live. Now, obviously, you can live however you want to live. If you want to continue being that way, do that, obviously. You can do whatever you want. But if you're noticing yourself closing yourself off from connection and you're sad about that, and you do want closer friendships, romantic partnerships, whatever, this is important to consider. And again, I've learned this from my own experience. I've had to really work on this. I realized that I'm not actually so totally introverted all the time. I am an introvert. I do need my battery recharged after social interactions, but I'm not completely and totally an introvert in the way I thought I was, where I could only find peace with myself, where I could only find peace reading books and watching movies. I'm not that way. I do like social interaction now that I'm actually more comfortable stating my boundaries and being authentic. Now it doesn't feel exhausting in the way it did when I was younger, when I was so scared to overgive, so scared to be judged and, abandoned, rejected, whatever. And when I knew that I would empty my cup out for somebody else if I was, given the opportunity to engage with somebody. Now it doesn't feel that way. And now I don't get as scared about it because I've learned the boundaries. I've learned the ability to express the boundary. Not even learning the boundaries, but the ability to express them and to feel okay doing it and to risk the vulnerability of expressing a boundary because it is vulnerable, right? But all that work comes into play together. It all works in tandem. So you need to start working on all of it. But I think the place to start, if this resonates with you, is to look at you as a people pleaser. Consider if you are a people pleaser and ask yourself what that means for you. And if it's true, and how your people pleasing might manifest in other ways in your life that you haven't noticed yet. Really think about it, consider that, and think about what's so scary about being rejected. What's so scary about being abandoned? And what's worse, being rejected and abandoned, or never actually giving yourself the opportunity to connect with people. Both are kind of painful and sad, right? So it's about deciding what is more worth the risk ultimately. And if what you're doing now, how you close off, how you feel selfish, quote unquote, is not really feeling satisfying to you, then maybe it's time to do something different. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. I hope it was informative. I hope it gave you a different perspective on people pleasing and how you might be a people pleaser despite how selfish, quote unquote, you might feel. And yeah, I hope it gave you something to work on or to think about in your next journaling session or your next therapy session or whatever. But yeah, if you want to work with me one-to-one and talk about these things in more detail, I offer calls. I also have email guidance. I also have a Substack where I write about topics like this. And you can follow my other social media accounts where all my other content is. All of the links will be in the show notes below as per usual. But other than that, thank you for listening, and I'll be back again soon with another episode.